Aminata had always felt like she was just another face in the crowd of her small Ivorian village. She worked as a farmer, living a simple life with her family, far from the mystical rumors that floated around the older villagers. But everything changed one night when she had a strange dream. In it, she stood before an ancient altar, surrounded by a mist that seemed to whisper her name. A figure appeared, a tall, dignified woman who held out a glowing object, saying, "You are the chosen one, Aminata. The spirits call you to fulfill a destiny beyond your understanding." Aminata woke up sweating, her heart racing. The vividness of the dream lingered, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. As the days passed, she began to notice things she had never seen before. Fleeting shadows in the corner of her eyes, whispers carried on the wind. It was as if the dream had unlocked something inside her. Desperate for answers, Aminata visited the village elder, Adama, to seek guidance. To her astonishment, Adama confirmed that the dream was not a mere illusion, it was a calling from the gods. Adama took Aminata to a sacred grove deep within the village, a place few dared to enter. The grove was said to hold the spirits of their ancestors, and it was here that the oracles communed with the gods. As they stood in the heart of the grove, Adama spoke the words Aminata had always feared to hear. "You are the heir to a powerful lineage of oracles. Your ancestors have chosen you to carry their mantle and protect the balance between the divine and the mortal." Aminata was stunned. She had always felt an innate connection to something greater than herself, but she never imagined it was linked to such a profound destiny. Adama explained that the oracles had the power to speak to the gods, interpret their will, and guide their people. However, with this power came great responsibility and sacrifice. "You will either embrace your destiny or forsake it," Adama warned. "But once you make your choice, there is no turning back." Aminata struggled with the revelation of her true heritage. She had always imagined herself living a simple life, married with children, contributing to her community. But now her life was tied to something much larger than herself. To gain clarity, she sought the guidance of the spirits. One night, as the moon rose high in the sky, she ventured into the grove alone, hoping to communicate with the ancestors. As she stood by the sacred tree at the center of the grove, the air seemed to thicken. Suddenly, she was surrounded by a dense mist, and a voice boomed from within it. "Prove your worth, Aminata. Only then will you know the truth of your destiny." Before she could respond, a glowing light appeared before her, leading her through the grove to an ancient stone circle. The spirits demanded she perform a ritual that would test her courage and purity of heart. With trembling hands, Aminata completed the ritual, feeling an ancient power coursing through her veins. The ritual was only the beginning. Aminata's connection to the spirits grew stronger with each passing day, but so did the pressure to fulfill her role. The villagers looked to her for guidance, and whispers of her powers began to spread. Yet, as Aminata embraced her destiny, a part of her longed for a simpler life. She began to question the life she had always dreamed of: marriage, children, and peace. Was it possible to live both a life of service to the spirits and one of personal happiness? One evening, Kofi, her childhood friend, came to her with a proposal. "We can leave together, Aminata," he said. "You don't have to serve the spirits forever. You have the power to choose your own path." His words stirred something within her. The life she could have with Kofi seemed so appealing. But deep down, she knew that the spirit's calling was not something she could ignore. Aminata continued to struggle with the tension between her destiny and her desire for a normal life. One day, she decided to visit the shrine of her ancestors, hoping to find answers. The moment she stepped inside, she felt a surge of energy that left her breathless. In the center of the shrine, an ancient altar stood, covered in symbols she had never seen before. As she approached, a voice echoed in her mind, clear and commanding, "You are the chosen one! You cannot escape your fate." In a trance-like state, Aminata felt herself drawn to the altar. The spirits revealed to her the origins of her lineage, a long line of powerful oracles who had guided the land for centuries. She was the last of them, the only one who could maintain the balance between the living and the divine. Her power was a gift, but it also came with an unrelenting duty. She had no choice but to accept it. To unlock the full extent of her powers, Aminata was instructed to perform a sacred ceremony that would bind her to the gods forever. The ceremony required her to offer something of great personal value, a sacrifice that would strengthen her connection to the divine. Aminata hesitated. What could she possibly offer that would fulfill the ritual? As the ceremony began, she was surrounded by the elders and other oracles, chanting in a language she couldn't understand. The air was thick with energy. Aminata's heart raced as she was asked to offer the one thing she held most dear, her freedom. As she relinquished her ties to the earthly realm, a great surge of power filled her, and she realized that she had made a pact with the spirits, one that would bind her to the divine for the rest of her life. Now fully bonded with the spirits, Aminata began to experience the true weight of her responsibilities. She was able to foresee events, communicate with the gods, and guide her people in ways she had never imagined. But with each vision came a new burden. The spirits showed her a shadowy figure, a dark presence that threatened the balance she had worked so hard to maintain. Late one evening, as Aminata meditated, the shadow figure appeared before her in the form of a dark mist. It spoke in a voice that seemed to resonate in her very soul. "The balance is shifting, and you will be the one to decide which side you take." The threat was real, and Aminata knew she could no longer deny the path that lay ahead of her. The time had come for her to confront the darkness. Aminata sought counsel from Adama, who had been her guide throughout her journey. "This is no ordinary force," Adama warned. "It is a spirit of chaos, born from the imbalance that has plagued the land for centuries. Only a true oracle can defeat it." The more Aminata learned about this dark force, the more she realized that the future of her village, and perhaps the entire world, rested in her hands. She would have to make a choice: confront the dark force and risk everything, or let it consume the land. With a heavy heart, Aminata prepared for the coming battle. She trained with the other oracles, honing her powers and seeking guidance from the gods. The villagers, aware of the growing danger, began to look to her for leadership. She was their last hope, but the weight of her destiny threatened to break her. Time for battle had come. To defeat the dark force, Aminata had to perform the most ancient and powerful ritual known to her people, a ritual that required immense courage and sacrifice. As she prepared, she realized the true cost of her power. The ritual would drain her life force, leaving her vulnerable. But it was the only way to protect her people and the balance of the world. Aminata stood at the edge of the sacred grove, surrounded by the other oracles. They chanted as she stepped forward, placing her hands on the ancient altar. She could feel the darkness closing in, but she remained resolute. The gods had given her the strength to face this moment, and she would not falter. With a deep breath, Aminata began the ritual, knowing that this would be the final test of her resolve. As Aminata's power surged, the dark force began to reveal itself, a towering shadow that seemed to devour everything in its path. It was a manifestation of chaos, a spirit that thrived on destruction. Aminata's heart pounded as she confronted it, using every ounce of her strength to push it back. The battle raged for hours, and just when it seemed that the darkness would consume her, Aminata remembered her ancestors, the oracles who had fought and died to protect the land. With one final desperate cry, Aminata released all of her power, drawing on the strength of the spirits and the ancient gods. The darkness screamed as it was sealed away, returning to the abyss from which it had come. The land was saved, but Aminata knew that the battle was far from over. The spirits had chosen her, and now she was bound to them forever. Her life had been forever changed, and she knew that her true destiny was only just beginning. The village was safe, but the cost of victory had been high. Aminata's power had drained her, and she was left weak and vulnerable. She had saved the land, but at what cost? As she recovered, she struggled with the realization that she could never go back to her old life. The spirits had claimed her, and she was bound to them for all eternity. Kofi returned, but he was not the same. He had seen the price of Aminata's power, and he knew that their paths had diverged. He wanted her to return to a simple life with him, but she knew that she could never abandon her duty. The bond between them had been broken, and Aminata had no choice but to continue her journey as the oracle. As Aminata grew stronger, she began to receive more frequent visits from the spirits. They guided her, helping her refine her abilities and deepen her connection to the divine. She was no longer just a woman, she was a conduit between the living and the gods. But the spirits did not always offer easy answers. Their guidance was cryptic, and their demands were unyielding. One day, as Aminata meditated in the grove, a vision appeared before her, a great flood that would ravage the land unless she intervened. The spirits warned her that she would have to make a sacrifice once again. The price of her power was always high, but Aminata had no choice. She was the oracle, and the spirits had a claim on her heart and soul. The flood came just as the spirits had warned. Aminata stood at the forefront of the battle to protect her people. With the power of the gods coursing through her, she worked tirelessly to guide her village to safety. The floodwaters raged, threatening to overwhelm everything in their path. But Aminata, with the strength of her ancestors, held the waters at bay, using her magic to protect the land. But the flood was not the only threat. As the waters receded, Aminata discovered that the dark force she had sealed away was not entirely gone. The spirits had warned her, but now the true challenge awaited. She had defeated the darkness once, but the battle was far from over. Aminata's powers were growing, but so was the shadow that lurked in the distance. She soon realized that the dark force was not a single entity but a collection of spirits that thrived on chaos and destruction. They had scattered, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Aminata knew that she had to find them before they could wreak havoc on the land once again. With the help of the spirits, she tracked down the source of the darkness. It was not a singular enemy but a collective force, one that sought to destroy the balance she had worked so hard to protect. She knew that the final battle was approaching, and she would have to face this ancient evil head-on. The spirits could not help her this time. This battle was hers alone to fight. The day of the final battle arrived. Aminata stood at the edge of the sacred grove, the place where the battle between light and darkness would take place. The spirits had abandoned her, leaving her to face the enemy alone. The shadowy figures of the dark spirits emerged from the mist, their eyes glowing with malice. Aminata knew that this was the moment she had been preparing for all her life. With the power of her ancestors behind her, she summoned the energy of the earth and the heavens. The battle was fierce, and the darkness fought with everything it had. But Aminata's resolve was unbreakable. She had chosen this path, and she would see it through to the end. With a final cry, she unleashed her full power, banishing the darkness from the land for good. Aminata stood victorious, but the cost of the battle had been immense. Her powers had been drained, and the land was scarred by the forces of darkness. The spirits had tested her and she had passed. But the road ahead was uncertain. Aminata knew that her duty was far from over, but she also realized that her journey had only just begun. As she gazed out over the land, she saw a new dawn rising. The spirits were no longer a distant presence but a part of her very soul. She had become the oracle her ancestors had foreseen. And while the path ahead was still fraught with challenges, she was no longer afraid. She had chosen her destiny, and with it the power to shape the future. In the aftermath of the battle, Aminata was left to ponder the true cost of her power. The sacrifices she had made weighed heavily on her heart, and she began to wonder if it had been worth it. The villagers, once so grateful for her guidance, now viewed her with a mixture of reverence and fear. The spirits returned to her, whispering of a new challenge. There was a price to be paid for the balance she had restored, and it was not one she could ignore. Aminata's powers were tied to the land, and to maintain that balance, she would have to sacrifice something of great personal value once again. Aminata knew that the time had come to make the ultimate sacrifice. But she was no longer the same person she had been when she first embraced her destiny. She had learned to accept the weight of her power and the responsibilities that came with it. Her journey had been long and arduous, but the promise of peace was worth the price. As she performed the final ritual, she offered her deepest sacrifice, her own freedom. With that act, she secured the balance between the living and the divine. The land would thrive and the spirits would remain at peace. But Aminata knew that the path ahead would be one of eternal service, and she embraced it with a heart full of gratitude. With the balance restored and the spirits appeased, Aminata was finally at peace. She had made her sacrifice and the land was safe. But the spirits had one final blessing for her, the gift of eternal guidance. Aminata would continue to serve as the oracle, but now she was no longer bound by the same constraints that had once held her captive. She had become a true vessel for the gods, a bridge between the living and the divine. Her power was no longer just a burden, it was a gift. And as she gazed out over the land, she knew that her journey had come full circle. The spirits had called her and she had answered. Years passed and Aminata's legacy grew. She became a symbol of strength and wisdom, revered by all who sought the guidance of the spirits. Her name was spoken with reverence across the land, and her story was told to generations to come. But even as she became a legend, Aminata never forgot the path she had walked, the sacrifices she had made and the choices she had faced. She had chosen to serve the spirits, and in doing so she had shaped the future of her people. And as the years passed, her legacy lived on, a testament to the power of destiny and the strength of the human spirit.